The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles under the crystal dome of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 1,000 different worlds sat in their assigned seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some floated in water tanks, others hung from the ceiling on silk threads, and many more sat on chairs designed for their unique bodies. Archivist Zethara moved slowly across the polished floor, her crystal body catching the light from 3 different suns. As a member of the Vorthax species, she was made of living mineral that had grown over her 300 years of life. Today, she carried a burden that felt heavier than her stone form, ancient records that nobody wanted to hear about. The council only met like this once every 1,000 years to review the archives of dead species. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Most of the time, the records were simple. A species would destroy itself with war, or a disease would wipe them out, or their star would explode. Nothing unusual, but today was different. Council members, Zethara began, her voice ringing like struck crystal through the hall. I present the extinction records from Archive Section Gamma 7. Most entries are routine, but one requires your attention. Ambassador Crixtal of the Hegemony shifted in his massive chair. His species looked like walking tanks, 8 feet tall with thick armor plating and forearms that could crush steel. He commanded the largest military force in the galaxy, and he had little patience for history lessons. Get on with it, Archivist, he rumbled. We have real business to discuss. Zethara touched the control panel with one crystal finger. A holographic display appeared above the center of the hall, showing an old document covered in strange writing. This record comes from the predecessor civilization, she continued. They existed in this galaxy 50,000 years before our current council was formed. Before they vanished, they left detailed files about many species they encountered. High Counselor Mothran leaned forward with interest. At 20,000 years old, he was one of the oldest beings in the galaxy. His people, the Eternals, lived for ages and remembered everything. Even he had only heard stories about the predecessors. Most interesting, Archivist. What did they record? The hologram changed to show a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. It looked peaceful and pretty with white clouds swirling over vast oceans. They called this world Sol 3, located in what we now call the dead zone of the outer spiral arm. The predecessors wrote extensive notes about the dominant species of this planet. They called them humans. A wave of chittering and buzzing filled the hall as various species discussed this among themselves. None of them had ever heard of humans. According to these records, Zethara continued, humans were unlike any species the predecessors had encountered before. They were not the strongest or the fastest. They could not fly like the Aryans or breathe underwater like the drift swimmers. They had no natural weapons like claws or poison. Then why do we care about them? Asked Counselor Vex, whose spider-like form clicked impatiently on the ceiling above. They sound weak. Zethara's crystal body grew dimmer, a sign of concern among her people. The predecessors called them persistence hunters. They wrote that humans would chase their prey for days without stopping, never giving up until they caught what they wanted. The hologram showed primitive humans running across vast grasslands, following large animals that looked tired and scared. The predecessors noted other unusual traits. Humans could survive in almost any environment on their planet. Hot deserts, frozen ice fields, high mountains, deep jungles. They adapted to everything. Many species can adapt, growled Crystal. What made these humans special? The Crystal Archivist touched her controls again. New images appeared. Humans sitting around fires, humans making tools from stones and sticks. Humans working together to build simple shelters. Humans were the only species the predecessors found who used fire as a tool. They cooked their food, which let them eat things that would poison other creatures. Fire also kept them warm and scared away dangerous animals. Interesting, but hardly threatening, commented Mothran. The predecessors thought differently, Zethara replied. The hologram changed to show the final entry in the ancient files. The writing looked rushed, as if whoever wrote it was in a hurry. Their last report about humans contained a warning. Let me read it exactly as they wrote it. The hall grew quiet as Zethara's voice rang out. We have observed the humans for 1,000 of their years. Our conclusion is certain. This species must never be allowed to leave their world. They are relentless. They do not accept defeat. They learn from every failure and grow stronger. They work together in ways we have never seen. If they ever reach the stars, no force in this galaxy will be able to contain their expansion. They are persistence incarnate. They are the Firebringers. They are those who refuse death itself. A moment of silence followed her words. Then Ambassador Crickstall began to laugh. His deep, booming laughter echoed through the hall, and soon other council members joined in. Refuse death? Firebringers? Crickstall wiped his eyes with one of his four hands. Archivist, surely these predecessors were telling stories to entertain their children. How could such primitive creatures be dangerous to a galactic civilization? Zathara checked her datapad. According to our star charts, the Sol system was destroyed by a gamma-ray burst approximately 50,000 years ago. The entire system is now a dead zone with no life signs. There you have it, declared Vex from the ceiling. These humans, if they ever existed, have been extinct for longer than most of our civilizations have existed. The predecessors were clearly prone to exaggeration. Other council members nodded their various heads, tentacles, and sensory organs in agreement. The idea that primitive tool users could threaten their advanced civilization seemed absurd, but High Counselor Mothran did not laugh. Something about the predecessor warning bothered him. In his 20,000 years of life, he had learned that ancient civilizations rarely wrote detailed warnings about things that were not real threats. Archivist Zathara, he said slowly. What happened to the predecessors? How did such an advanced civilization vanish? Zathara consulted her records. Unknown, High Counselor. They left no final records. Their cities were found empty, their technology abandoned. No signs of war, disease, or natural disaster. They simply disappeared. How very strange, Mothran mused. Crickstall stood up to his full imposing height. High Counselor, surely we are not going to waste council time worrying about extinct primitives and vanished civilizations? We have real issues to address. The mining disputes in the Vega sector, the trade route negotiations with the inner systems, Yes. Mothran waved a thin hand dismissively. You are correct, Ambassador. Archivist, please file these records in the Historical Curiosities section. There is no need for further discussion. Zathara bowed her crystal head. As you wish, High Counselor. As the council moved on to other business, Zathara gathered her ancient documents. She had done her duty by presenting the records, but something still worried her. The predecessors had been very advanced, possibly more so than the current council. They had survived for millions of years and explored the entire galaxy. What could have made such a powerful civilization afraid of primitive humans? And more importantly, what had made the predecessors disappear so completely that even their warnings were forgotten? She looked once more at the image of the blue world called Sol 3, now nothing but radiation and dead rock floating in empty space. Whatever humans had been, they were gone now. The galaxy was safe from the Firebringers who refused death. At least that was what everyone believed. Deep Space Monitoring Station Theta-7 floated in the empty darkness between star systems, far from any inhabited worlds. It was a lonely posting, the kind of assignment given to junior officers who needed to prove themselves or senior officers who had made mistakes. Velox pressed her webbed hands against the sensor controls, her gills fluttering with nervousness. As a member of the drift swimmer species, she was more comfortable in water than in the artificial atmosphere of the station. But someone had to watch the sensors during the night shift. The drift swimmers were not warriors like the hegemony or ancient scholars like the Eternals. They were explorers and scientists, content to swim through the vast oceans of their homeworld and study the currents that flowed between the stars. Velox had volunteered for deep space duty because she wanted to discover something new, something that would make her family proud. She just never expected it to happen on a Tuesday. The sensor display flickered with an unusual pattern. Several objects were moving through the Sol sector, the dead zone that had been empty for 50,000 years. Velox adjusted the controls, trying to get a clearer reading. Multiple contacts, she whispered to herself. Fusion drive signatures. But that's impossible. She called her supervisor, Lieutenant Blix, who came swimming through the water-filled corridors to her station. Blix was older and more experienced, with scars from his years of deep space exploration. What do you have, Velox? Sir, I'm reading at least 12 fusion drives moving through the Sol sector. They appear to be heading toward the Kepler 442 system. Blix studied the display, his large eyes taking in all the data.
Sensor ghosts.
The gamma radiation from the Sol nova sometimes creates false readings. Log it and forget it. But sir, the signatures are too clear to be ghosts, and they're maintaining formation, moving with purpose. Velox, Blix said patiently, Nothing has lived in the Sol sector for 50 millennia. Whatever you think you're seeing, it's not real. But Velox was young and curious, and she had excellent hearing even for a drift swimmer. She turned up the audio sensors and listened to the radio frequencies coming from the mysterious objects. What she heard made her gills go completely still. Voices. Clear, intelligent voices speaking in a language she had never heard before. They were coordinating movement, sharing information, working together with a precision that impressed her. "Sir," she said quietly, "you need to hear this." Blix listened to the audio feed, and his expression changed from annoyance to confusion to something that might have been fear. "Alert the council immediately," he ordered, "and send a message to the nearest science vessel. We need to investigate this." 3 light years away, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Horizons, watching the blue and green world of Kepler 442b grow larger on the main screen. Behind her, 200,000 human beings slept in cryogenic pods, the last survivors of their dying homeworld. Earth had not died from gamma rays, as the galaxy believed. It had died slowly, poisoned by its own children who had forgotten how to care for their home. By the time humanity realized their mistake, it was too late to save their world. But it was not too late to save themselves. The New Horizons was not the sleek, advanced ship that other species might have built. It was a collection of parts and pieces, held together by human determination and some very creative engineering. Half cargo ship, half generation vessel, and half military transport. It defied mathematical logic by somehow being more than the sum of its parts. "Captain," called out Navigator Liu from his station, "we're receiving radio transmissions from an unknown source. Someone's trying to talk to us." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. They had hoped to find an empty system where they could establish their colony in peace. Contact with alien life was something they had prepared for, but hoped to avoid until they were stronger. "Put it through the translation matrix," she ordered. "Let Atlas work on it." Atlas was humanity's greatest achievement, an artificial intelligence that had been built to help them survive among the stars. Unlike the simple computers used by other species, Atlas could learn, adapt, and think in ways that seemed almost human. "I am making progress with their language, Captain," Atlas announced in its calm, synthetic voice. "They appear to be members of something called the Galactic Council. They are requesting identification and stating our presence here violates established territorial boundaries." "Tell them we're refugees seeking a new home," Sarah replied. "We mean no harm to anyone." The response came quickly, translated by Atlas into clear English. "Unknown vessels, you will submit to boarding and inspection. Prepare to be escorted to the nearest council station for processing." Sarah looked around at her bridge crew. They were tired, desperate people who had already lost everything once. They would not be refugees again. "Atlas, are we reading any weapons on their ships?" "Negative, Captain. The approaching vessel appears to be a science ship with minimal defenses." "Then we stick to the plan. We're going to establish our colony, and we'll deal with whoever wants to stop us." First contact happened on the surface of Kepler 442b, in a valley that the humans had chosen for their first settlement. The drift swimmer science vessel landed near the human shuttles, and representatives from both species met under an alien sky. Commander Reefsinger of the drift swimmers expected to find primitive refugees, possibly some survivors from a forgotten colony ship that had been drifting through space for centuries. What she found instead confused and worried her. The humans had been on the planet for only 3 weeks, but they had already begun transforming the landscape. They had built temporary shelters, established power generators, and started digging foundations for permanent structures. More impressive was how they worked together, like a school of fish moving as one, but with the intelligence to plan and adapt. "I am Commander Reefsinger," she announced through her translation device. "I represent the Galactic Council's First Contact Division. You are in violation of Settlement Protocol 7. This system is reserved for Council expansion." The human leader, who introduced herself as Captain Chen, listened politely, but her response was firm. "Commander, we appreciate your position, but we're not going anywhere. Earth is dead, and these people are all that's left of humanity. We need a home, and this planet can provide one." "The Council has procedures for refugee placement," Reefsinger explained. "There are designated worlds where displaced populations can be relocated." "We've seen your procedures," Captain Chen replied. Atlas intercepted your communications during our approach. Your council assigns species to specific roles based on their capabilities. Warriors get military worlds, scholars get research stations, and refugees get whatever's left over. Reefsinger was surprised that they had decoded council communication so quickly. The system works efficiently. Each species contributes according to their strengths. That's not how humanity works, Chen said simply. We don't accept assigned roles. We make our own way. Over the following days, Reefsinger studied the human colony with growing amazement. They seemed to thrive on challenges that would defeat other species. When their power generators broke down, they built new ones from spare parts. When local predators threatened their settlement, they didn't run. They studied the creatures, learned their behavior, and found ways to coexist. Most remarkable was how they approached problems. Other species would follow established procedures, call for help from their homeworlds, or simply accept limitations. Humans treated every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved. When Reefsinger asked Captain Chen how they had learned to adapt so quickly, the human woman smiled. Commander, we spent 200,000 years surviving on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, plagues, predators, and finally our own mistakes. We learned to adapt because the alternative was extinction. But your technology, Reefsinger protested, your ships, your AI, your manufacturing capabilities, they're far beyond what we expected from a refugee population. We had good teachers, Chen replied. Every failure taught us something new. Every disaster made us stronger. We learned not to depend on anyone but ourselves. That night, Reefsinger sent her report back to the council. She tried to describe what she had seen, but the words seemed inadequate. How could she explain a species that treated the impossible as merely difficult? How could she make them understand that these humans were unlike anything in the galaxy? She ended her report with a personal observation that would later be ignored by her superiors. These humans are not refugees in any traditional sense. They are survivors of a type we have never encountered. They do not seek our protection or guidance. They seek only the opportunity to continue existing, and they will reshape whatever environment they encounter to achieve that goal. In the cryogenic bay of the New Horizons, 200,000 humans continued their dreamless sleep, unaware that their presence had been noted by a galaxy that was unprepared for what they represented. And in the deepest archives of the Council, Archivist Zethara noticed an unusual energy signature in her daily reports. Something was happening in the Sol sector, something that reminded her of ancient warnings about persistence hunters and firebringers. She made a note to investigate further, but there were so many other things to worry about. 15 years after first contact, the galaxy was beginning to notice that something had changed in the Outer Rim territories. What started as one human settlement on Kepler 442b had become something much larger and more complex. Ambassador Crixtel studied the intelligence reports in his office aboard the Hegemony flagship Dominator. Each report made him more confused and angry. According to his spies, humans now occupied over 40 different star systems. They had established mining operations on airless moons, built cities on frozen worlds, and created settlements in places that every other species considered uninhabitable. Explain this to me again, he demanded from his intelligence chief, Colonel Vask. How does a refugee population expand so quickly? Vask, a seasoned warrior from the Hegemony's elite forces, looked uncomfortable. Sir, they don't follow standard expansion protocols. Most species establish 1 or 2 colonies, then spend decades building them up before attempting further expansion. Humans seem to establish multiple colonies simultaneously. That's impossible. The resource requirements alone would bankrupt most civilizations. That's what we thought too, sir. But humans approach colonization differently. Instead of shipping everything from their homeworld, they manufacture what they need locally. They turn asteroids into factories, ice comets into water supplies, and hostile environments into productive settlements. Crixtal stood up and walked to the large display screen that showed a map of human space. What he saw violated everything he understood about galactic expansion. Most species expanded in careful, planned steps. They would identify a suitable world, conduct extensive surveys, obtain council approval, and then spend years preparing a proper colony. The process was orderly, regulated, and predictable. Human expansion looked like chaos. They seemed to settle anywhere and everywhere, often choosing worlds that others had rejected as worthless. Toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, dangerous radiation, none of these things stopped them. "Show me the Vega 7 settlement," Krixtal ordered. The display changed to show a world covered in poisonous clouds and acid rain. No species in the galaxy would consider it habitable. "Humans have been there for 3 years," Vask reported. "They built sealed habitats and established geothermal power plants. They're using the planet's toxic atmosphere to manufacture chemicals that they trade to other systems." "They're mining the poison?" Krixtal asked in disbelief. "Yes, sir. What kills other species, they turn into profitable resources." The next example was even more disturbing. Humans had established a settlement in the Proxima system, on a world locked in permanent ice age. Instead of trying to heat the entire planet, they had built underground cities powered by nuclear reactors. The ice wasn't an obstacle, it was their water supply. "How many of them are there now?" Krixtal asked. "Our estimates suggest 50 million humans spread across 200 settled worlds," Vask replied. "But sir, there's something else. Something more concerning." "What?" "They're not just expanding randomly. There's a pattern. Every human settlement is positioned to support further expansion. They're building a network of supply bases that will allow them to reach even more remote systems." Krixtal felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. "They're not refugees looking for a home. They're an invasion force. It gets worse, sir. Our merchants are reporting that human traders are undercutting established prices on most trade routes. They're offering better quality goods at lower prices. How is that possible? Human manufacturing is different. They don't just build things, they improve them. Every human tool, ship, or device is slightly better than what other species produce. They seem incapable of building something without trying to make it work better than before." In her crystal office on Nexus Prime, Archivist Zethara was reaching the same disturbing conclusions. She had been tracking human expansion for the past 5 years, ever since the first reports of unusual activity. In the Outer Rim, what she discovered made her remember the ancient predecessor. Warnings with growing alarm. She had requested detailed information about human technology and society from every council contact who had dealt with them. The reports painted a picture of a species unlike any other in the galaxy. Humans did not accept limitations. When faced with a problem, they didn't look for existing solutions. They invented new ones. When told something was impossible, they seemed to take it as a personal challenge. Commander Reef Singer's updated reports from the Kepler colony were particularly revealing. The drift swimmer officer had been assigned as permanent liaison to the human settlement, and her observations grew more detailed and more concerned with each passing year. "They approach every task as if their survival depends on its success," one report read. "When their first atmospheric processors failed, they didn't request replacement parts from their homeworld. They designed better ones using local materials. When dangerous predators threatened their settlements, they didn't retreat. They studied the creatures until they understood them, then found ways to coexist or, in some cases, domesticate them." But it was Reef Singer's latest report that truly worried Zethara. The humans were building starships, not just transport vessels, but ships designed for long-range exploration and potential conflict. "Human ship design follows no established principles," Reef Singer had written. "They seem to assume that every vessel might need to operate independently for extended periods, fight superior enemies, or adapt to unknown circumstances. Their ships are overbuilt by galactic standards, with redundant systems, modular designs, and capabilities that seem excessive for peaceful exploration." Zethara accessed her most secure files and pulled up the predecessor warnings once again. She read the ancient text with new understanding. They are relentless. They do not accept defeat. They learn from every failure and grow stronger. They work together in ways we have never seen. Every word was proving accurate. Human expansion wasn't just fast, it was relentless. They didn't stop to rest or consolidate their gains. Each settlement became a launching point for 3 more. Each solved problem became a template for solving similar problems elsewhere. If they ever reach the stars, no force in this galaxy will be able to contain their expansion. Zethara made a decision that would change her life and possibly the fate of the galaxy. She requested an immediate meeting with High Counselor Mothran. 3 days later, she stood in the counselor's private chambers, surrounded by artifacts from thousands of civilizations that had risen and fallen over the millennia. "High Counselor," she began, "I believe we have a problem." Mothran, ancient and wise, listened carefully as she presented her analysis. Charts, graphs, and projections filled the air around them. showing human expansion rates, technological development, and resource utilization. They are following the exact pattern described in the predecessor warnings, she concluded. Every prediction is coming true. Mothran studied the data for long minutes before speaking. What do you recommend, Archivist? We need to understand what happened to the predecessors. How did such an advanced civilization deal with humans? More importantly, why did they fail? And if we discover that the predecessors couldn't stop human expansion? Zathara's crystal body dimmed with worry. Then we need to decide whether we want to repeat their mistakes or find a different approach. What different approach could there be? If humans truly cannot be contained, then perhaps, Zathara said quietly, we need to learn to work with them before it's too late. But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if it was already too late. 50 million humans across 200 worlds, and their expansion was accelerating. Every month brought reports of new settlements, new technologies, new achievements that should have been impossible. The galaxy was changing, and the Galactic Council was unprepared for what was coming. In human space, Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, stood on the bridge of humanity's first purpose-built warship. The vessel was named Persistence, and it carried the hopes and determination of her entire species. Atlas, she said to the ship's AI, what's our current expansion rate? 12 new settlements this month, Admiral. We now have permanent human presence in 47 star systems, with exploration teams surveying 30 more. And our population? 53 million and growing. The combination of improved medical technology and successful terraforming projects has allowed us to end the population controls that were necessary during our refugee period. Sarah smiled as she looked out at the stars. Humanity had come so far from those desperate refugees fleeing a dying Earth. They had not just survived, they had begun to thrive. Atlas, long-range sensors are detecting increased Council fleet movements in our border systems. Are we making them nervous? It appears so, Admiral. However, our expansion is entirely peaceful. We have claimed no inhabited worlds and have established trade relationships with every species we have encountered. That may not be enough, Sarah mused. Some people don't like change even when it doesn't hurt them. She didn't know it yet, but her words were prophetic. In the great halls of the Council, plans were already being made to stop human expansion before it could threaten the established order of the galaxy. The time for warnings was passing. The time for action was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any meeting in their recorded history. Representatives from every major species had gathered on Nexus Prime, their usual diplomatic courtesy replaced by obvious tension and fear. Ambassador Krikstal stood at the center of the Great Hall, his forearms gesturing at the holographic displays that surrounded him. The images showed human settlements spreading across the galaxy like a virus, each new colony spawning 3 more in an endless pattern of expansion. Council members, his voice boomed across the chamber, we face an unprecedented threat to galactic stability. In 20 years, this human species has grown from a single refugee ship to a civilization spanning 300 star systems. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled representatives. Many had read the reports, but seeing the full scope of human expansion displayed visually was deeply disturbing. They ignore our territorial boundaries, Krikstal continued. They reject our settlement protocols. They establish colonies without permission and trade without regulation. If we allow this to continue, the entire galactic order will collapse. High Counselor Mothran raised his hand for silence. At 20,000 years old, he had seen many crises, but none quite like this one. Ambassador Krikstal makes valid points, he said carefully. But we must remember that humans have committed no acts of aggression. They have not attacked our ships or conquered our worlds. They are simply expanding very rapidly. That expansion is the threat. Krikstal slammed his primary fist on his podium. They reproduce like bacteria and spread to every available environment. At their current rate, they will outnumber all other species combined within a century. From her position in the archives section, Zathara watched the debate with growing dread. She had spent months studying the predecessor records, trying to understand what had happened to that ancient civilization. What she had discovered terrified her, but the Council was not ready to hear it yet. What do you propose, Ambassador? Asked Counselor Vex from his position on the ceiling. The spider-like being had initially dismissed humans as irrelevant, but even he was now concerned by their rapid spread. Containment Protocol Omega, Krikstal announced. The same protocol we used to cage the berserker species 10,000 years ago. We establish a military blockade around human space and prevent any further expansion. The hall erupted in discussion. Containment Protocol Omega was the most extreme measure the Council could take short of total extermination. It had only been used twice in galactic history, both times against species that posed existential threats to other civilizations. The berserkers were different, argued Counselor Deep Current of the Drift Swimmers. They were actively destroying other worlds, murdering entire populations. Humans have harmed no one, haven't they? Krikstal pulled up new displays showing trade route disruptions and economic data. Human merchants are undercutting our established commerce. Their superior manufacturing is putting our industries out of business. Their colonies are claiming resources that other species need. That is competition, not aggression, Deep Current replied. Competition that threatens our way of life. These humans don't follow the rules. They don't accept their assigned place in the galactic hierarchy. They act as if they have the right to take whatever they want, go wherever they choose, and do whatever they please. High Counselor Mothron studied the faces around him. He could see fear in their expressions, but also something else, jealousy. Many species had accepted limitations on their expansion, their technology, their ambitions. Humans had not, and their success made others feel small and constrained. I call for a vote, Mothron announced. All in favor of implementing Containment Protocol Omega against human space? The vote was closer than Krikstal had expected, 700 in favor, 300 opposed, but it was enough. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had authorized military action against a member species. Admiral Krikstal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Victory, and surveyed the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. 10,000 warships from 100 different species, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shield systems that could deflect stars. Against them stood the humans, with their ramshackle collection of converted colony ships and hastily built warships. Intelligence reports suggested they had fewer than 500 vessels capable of military action. This will be over quickly, Admiral Krikstal told his staff. One decisive victory will demonstrate Council authority and force the humans to accept reasonable limitations. The first battle occurred at Proxima Centauri, one of humanity's oldest settlements. The Council fleet arrived expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found every human ship positioned for maximum defensive advantage, using the system's asteroids and radiation fields as cover. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 37 human vessels had been destroyed along with 12 Council ships. By any measure, it was a Council victory, but Admiral Krikstal felt no satisfaction as he reviewed the battle recordings. The humans had fought with a desperation and cunning that disturbed him. They had used suicide attacks, kamikaze runs, and tactical maneuvers that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Worse, every human ship had transmitted detailed battle data back to human space before being destroyed. They had treated the entire engagement as a learning exercise, gathering intelligence even as they died. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from human space. It appears they're building something. What kind of something? Unknown, sir, but it's big. The second battle at Wolf 359 lasted only 2 hours, but the outcome was very different. The humans arrived with ships that seemed designed specifically to counter every weapon system the Council had used at Proxima. Their shields deflected energy weapons that should have cut through them like paper. Their armor absorbed projectiles that should have shattered their hulls. Admiral Krikstal watched in disbelief as his superior numbers meant nothing against human tactics he had never encountered. They used coordinated swarm attacks, electronic warfare, and something his tactical computers couldn't even identify. How are they doing this? He demanded. His science officer, a brilliant member of the crystalline Vorthak species, studied the sensor readings with growing amazement. Admiral, they appear to have analyzed our weapons from the first battle and developed specific countermeasures. But that's impossible. No species can redesign their entire fleet in just 3 months. Unless they can, Krikstal said grimly. The war that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Council had superior numbers, better technology, and 10,000 years of military experience. The humans had something else, an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every battle became a lesson for them. Every defeat taught them something new about council tactics and technology. They adapted faster than any species had a right to, turning each engagement into an opportunity to grow stronger. At the Battle of New Terra, 500 human ships held off 5,000 council vessels for 6 months. They used the planet's moons as mobile fortresses, converted civilian vessels into weapons platforms, and employed tactics that changed daily as they learned from each encounter. Admiral Krixtal found himself fighting an enemy that treated warfare like a science experiment. They tested new weapons, new strategies, new formations with each engagement. They seemed more interested in learning than winning, but somehow their learning made them impossible to defeat. They're not trying to win this war, he realized during a staff meeting after another frustrating stalemate. They're trying to understand us. Sir? Every attack, every defense, every maneuver, they're gathering data. They want to know how we think, how we fight, how we can be beaten. They're treating this entire war as an intelligence-gathering operation. His staff looked at him as if he had lost his mind, but Krixtal was beginning to understand something that terrified him. Humans didn't fight wars the way other species did. They didn't seek quick victories or negotiate favorable surrenders. They fought to learn. And once they learned enough, they would win. In her crystal chambers on Nexus Prime, archivist Zethara received the final piece of information she had been searching for. Deep in the predecessor archives, she had found their last message, hidden in a file that had been sealed for 50,000 years. The message was short, but devastating. We tried to contain them. We tried to limit them. We tried to control them. In the end, we realized the truth. Humans cannot be caged. They can only be partnered with or destroyed completely. We chose partnership, but it was too late. They no longer trusted us. Now we face a choice between extinction and exile. We choose exile. Perhaps the next civilization will be wiser. Zethara understood now why the predecessors had vanished. They hadn't been destroyed by humans. They had fled from them, abandoning the galaxy rather than face the consequences of their failed containment. And now the current council was making the same mistake. She sent an urgent message to High Counselor Mothran. The war must stop immediately. We are repeating the predecessor's error. Every day we fight, we teach them how to defeat us. Soon they will know us better than we know ourselves. But her message arrived too late. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council no longer served for peaceful debates about trade routes and territorial disputes. Maps showing troop movements and battle damage covered every surface, while holographic displays tracked the retreat of council forces across multiple sectors. High Counselor Mothran stood before the assembled representatives, his 20,000-year-old frame looking more fragile than ever before. Around him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy waited for words that might explain how their vast military superiority had crumbled so completely. The containment operation has failed, he announced, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. Admiral Krixtal's fleet is in full retreat. Human forces now control over 2,000 star systems, and their expansion continues at an accelerated pace. Ambassador Vex clicked nervously on the ceiling above. How is this possible? We had 10,000 ships against their few hundred. Numbers are meaningless when your enemy learns faster than you can adapt, Mothran replied. Every engagement taught them something new about our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. By the end, they knew us better than we knew ourselves. From her position in the archives section, Zethara watched the council grapple with a truth she had discovered too late. The predecessor warnings hadn't been the ravings of a primitive civilization. They had been the desperate final words of beings who had learned, at terrible cost, what humanity truly represented. High Counselor, she called out, rising from her crystal chair. Permission to present additional archive material. Mothran nodded wearily. Proceed, archivist. Perhaps the past can explain our present failure. Zethara activated the central display, showing the final predecessor message that she had discovered in the deepest archives. The ancient text appeared in the air above them, glowing with an ominous light. We tried to contain them. We tried to limit them. We tried to control them. In the end, we realized the truth. Humans cannot be caged. They can only be partnered with or destroyed completely. We chose partnership, but it was too late. They no longer trusted us. Now we face a choice between extinction and exile. We choose exile. Perhaps the next civilization will be wiser. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The predecessors, the most advanced civilization in galactic history, had faced the same choice now confronting the council. The predecessors didn't vanish mysteriously, Zethara continued. They fled. They abandoned this galaxy rather than continue fighting a species they could not defeat or control. Impossible, growled what remained of Admiral Krixtal's pride. We are the most advanced military force in galactic history. Our technology spans 100,000 years of development. And yet, Mothran said softly, we are losing to refugees who have been spacefaring for less than 30 years. The truth was bitter but undeniable. Humanity had not just survived the Council's attempt at containment. They had used it as an opportunity to learn everything they needed to know about galactic civilization. Every battle had been a classroom. Every defeat had been tuition paid for knowledge that made them stronger. What are our options? Asked Deep Current of the drift swimmers. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication system activated. A human voice speaking perfect galactic standard filled the hall. High Counselor Mothran, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez speaking for humanity. We request permission to address the council directly. The representatives looked at each other in confusion and fear. No unauthorized transmission should have been able to penetrate the council's communication systems. Yet here was a human speaking to them as if their most advanced security meant nothing. You may speak, Mothran replied after a moment of hesitation. The central display shimmered and resolved into the image of a middle-aged human woman, with kind eyes and a warm smile that somehow felt predatory to the watching aliens. Thank you, High Counselor. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I serve as humanity's chief diplomatic representative. I want to discuss ending the current conflict. You mean our surrender, Krixtal said bitterly. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. No, Ambassador. I mean partnership, cooperation, a new way of organizing galactic civilization that benefits everyone. What could you possibly offer us that we cannot take for ourselves? Fex demanded from the ceiling. Everything, Dr. Vasquez replied simply. We offer you the chance to grow beyond your current limitations, to explore new technologies, new worlds, new possibilities that your rigid hierarchy has prevented you from discovering. Mothran leaned forward with interest. Explain. Your current system assigns each species a specific role based on their perceived capabilities. Warriors fight, scholars research, merchants trade. Everyone stays in their assigned place and the galaxy remains stable but stagnant. The human woman gestured, and new displays appeared around her showing technological developments, resource utilization charts, and population growth statistics. In 30 years, humanity has developed technologies that surpass your 100,000-year advancement. We've established settlements in environments you consider uninhabitable. We've solved problems you thought were unsolvable, not because we're superior to you, but because we refuse to accept limitations. Your point? Krixtal asked. Imagine what we could accomplish working together. Imagine Vorthak crystal technology combined with human adaptability. Drift swimmer exploration skills merged with our manufacturing capabilities. Hegemony military discipline enhanced by our tactical innovation. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. The idea was seductive but also terrifying. Their entire civilization was built on the principle of stable hierarchy and assigned roles. And if we refuse? Deep Current asked. Dr. Vasquez's smile never wavered, but her eyes grew cold. Then we continue expanding until we encompass the entire galaxy. We don't want to be your conquerors, but we will not be your prisoners either. The choice is yours, and you would destroy us? Mothran asked quietly. We would replace you, she replied honestly. Not through malice, but through simple growth. We expand because expansion means survival. We adapt because adaptation means progress. We persist because persistence is what made us who we are. Krixtal stood to his full imposing height, his forearms clenched in fury. What are you? What kind of species threatens an entire galactic civilization with extinction? Dr. Vasquez looked directly at him, and for a moment her human warmth was replaced by something far older and more dangerous. We are what evolution produces when a species spends 200,000 years refusing to go extinct. We are the descendants of creatures who survived ice ages by making fire, who crossed oceans in wooden boats, who walked on other worlds because someone told them it was impossible. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are persistence incarnate. We are the firebringers who refuse death. We are exactly what your ancient warnings told you we were. The predecessors warned you because they learned the hard way. There is no containing humanity. There is only learning to work with us. The silence that followed was broken by Mothran's ancient voice. What would partnership look like? Simple, Dr. Vasquez replied. We tear down the barriers that prevent species from reaching their full potential. We eliminate the territorial restrictions that limit exploration. We share technology freely instead of hoarding it. We treat the galaxy as a collaborative frontier instead of a collection of isolated kingdoms. That would mean the end of our current civilization, Vex pointed out. Yes, she agreed, and the beginning of something far greater. Hours of debate followed, but the outcome was inevitable. The Council could choose evolution or extinction, partnership or replacement. The humans had made their position clear. They would continue expanding regardless of what the Council decided, but they preferred to do so as allies rather than conquerors. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Not because every species loved the idea, but because the alternative was unthinkable. As the Council session ended and representatives began the complex process of restructuring their entire civilization, Zethara remained in her crystal chair, thinking about the cyclical nature of history. She began composing a new entry for the Galactic Archives, one that future civilizations might discover millions of years hence. Final entry regarding species designation. Homo sapiens. Common name humans. Classification uncontainable. Historical pattern. Expansion through persistence, adaptation, and cooperation. Outcome of containment attempts. Failure in all recorded cases. Recommendation for future civilizations. Partnership essential for survival. Alternative outcomes. Replacement or exile. She paused in her writing and looked up at the stars visible through the chamber's crystal dome. Somewhere out there, human ships were already heading toward the next galaxy, carrying with them the promise of change and the threat of transformation. Note for future archaeologists, she continued. Ancient warnings about this species were accurate but insufficient. The predecessors feared human expansion. We attempted human containment. Both approaches failed because they misunderstood the fundamental nature of humanity. Humans do not conquer. They do not destroy. They simply refuse to be limited by what others consider possible. She finished her entry and sealed it in the deepest archives, where it would wait to guide or warn whatever civilization might discover it in the distant future.